Okay. Now it's like software-wise, I guess or not. But like what I was really talking about um, is on the Mac hardware, and that's the thing. The iMac's great. And I saw they updated the Mac Mini and they updated the MacBook. There are some updates I wish they would have made to the MacBook that they didn't make, and there's some updates they didn't make to the Mac Pro they probably should have. I've already addressed that. But then there's the systems that they haven't been updated in over a year. I'm talking about the Mac Pro, and I can understand why they haven't. I have a feeling to upgrade the Mac Pro, they're probably waiting on the new 6-core Xeons or maybe a version of the 8-core that will allow for simultaneous so they can make a 16-core system. So it's a true order of magnitude increase. But there are so many things about the Mac Pro that are just, it's a really dated system. I mean, I'm aware it's not a bad system, but it's not a state-of-the-art system. It's not a pro system. There's a lot of technologies you're doing on that system along the way around. I mean, you have motherboards now that are available to you and me as end users, not OEMs, you and me as end users, that have 7 PCI Express slots on them, 4 of which can be 16X. They have With that, they have onboard RAID, they have onboard 8-channel audio, and they have USB 3 in the new serial ATA, I want to say 6 connector, and they support the 5600 6-core system, so you can build a 12-core system out of them. It's like and if you go and build a system like I'm talking about that has 8 serial ATA connections on it, so you could have a 16 terabyte system for $1,500 less than the closest comparable Mac Pro. It's one of those, it's like, they need to do one of two things with these machines. If they want to push them to last a long time, and the last time they updated the Mac Pro, they didn't really update it that much. They just basically made some tweaks to it. So it was kind of a little behind the curve when it came. It was one of those coming up to the line things.
I had the last gen before it went DDR3. And because I don't like, for super scale systems, I don't like DDR3.
DDR3 is good if you're using a processor that fully supports it, and you're using tri-channel, a motherboard that's doing tri-channel.
Yeah, tri-channel, but check it out. I preferred the previous Mac Pro, where you can have 4 channels, and in parallel, if you had separate CPUs, you would be running two
no,
channels.
and I would argue that the version you're talking about is actually better than the current version. It's almost like they downgraded it when they upgraded it.
That's an Intel thing. Intel decided not to support fully buffered channels and improve. That's their own technology.
I know.
They didn't have the AMDs, and you could actually get up to 6 channels per CPU bus. And you still have the same latency issues as DDR3 as if it was fully buffered, but I guarantee you can easily address latency with better AMDs. And to me, that's a way better avenue to take in beefing up memory, which is the whole point of really getting workstations and servers, versus getting stuck in a DDR3 world and whatever Intel dictates. Now, I've heard rumors that Apple's considering, I don't know if it's bunk at this point, but we're talking to AMD. And boy, would I really like for them to get a better price competitor in the workstation class, server class.
The only problem I see with that is for a lot of tasks that you would use a Mac Pro for. Mm-hmm. And the real reason this is even an issue at all is because if you need OS 10 for the task you're doing, which there are some tasks you need OS 10 because they're OS 10 only and they're OS 10 tasks, and you need a true power system, your only option is to buy the Mac Pro Apple's selling.
Yep.
But when you compare, and I know there are people who think AMD is just as comparable as Intel, but AMD is a different type of architecture, and in some ways, I feel like as of late, AMD is a little behind the curve in Intel. They're keen in a few areas.
Give them time.
Well,
We're
no,
working
it's
on
one of
it.
those things. I don't see switching to AMD. I hope they come back. I would like to see them get back where they're just as competitive with Intel as
Well,
they.
I don't think they're going to go all AMD. I'm saying it would be an option. It would be really stupid to go all AMD and then get rid of Intel. I mean, if
Yeah,
that's
no,
what
no,
they
no.
did,
That's the thing, and that's the way I hear that rumor, and I'm like, no, that's the stupidest thing Apple could do right now. It really is.
I'm about it as being an option. I can't.
Okay.
Oh Lord, if they actually ditched Intel completely to go all AMD, no.
So basically, use AMD to allow them to provide a cheap Mac or a more affordable Mac. That's like.
Exactly. It opens up the line to make more affordable Macs. Now, the biggest issue that I have is that a lot of comparisons that go against the Mac Pro, and of course I own it now. I've been on my videos stated that Apple is pretty much the only OEM that I will buy from, because every other PC in there, and I also have 6 PCs in this room, are all built by myself. So I am a custom builder, and I advocate custom building. But in all fairness, most people that I deal with in computer world don't want anything to do or touch anything near having to open up a case or do anything. They just want to buy it.
That's actually something that we got into talking about. We actually wound up doing a show that nobody's ever going to see because it didn't get taped. We wound up talking about like what you're talking about. The sad truth is, there aren't really very many good OEMs right now.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is one of them, but they charge a hell of a lot for it, and they're
comparable in the workstation.
in the workstations they're comparable, but in everything else they're charging out the wazoo. And I would agree. In the workstations, price wise, they're comparable. I just wish the Mac Pro wasn't as dated. I really wish what they would have done instead of upgrading the last Mac Pro would have been, even though it would have been dating a little more, is they would have stuck with the other, because they can still buy those. But like you say, it's an Intel thing. It's complex. Anyways.
But Apple does not make a box, and that's what I think people, and that's why a lot of people advocate a mid tower for Apple, is because essentially you have the Mac Mini, which is one of my favorite machines. It does run my Mac Mini Media Center, which I have several videos on, and it's a 2006 model. It's a Core Duo. It's not even a Core 2 Duo.
Right.
And it pumps HD, and I have videos on it. I love that little thing.
Oh, well, no, it's like people bash on the Duos because they're old at this point, but they're also a tried technology that's understood very well. As they've gotten ridiculously cheap, and unless you're doing real powerhouse stuff that you need an i5 or an i7, Duos are a good cheap little chip. Now, there's some issues because they use a different socket set. If you're doing i5 and i7 systems in the same thing, you're better off to go with an i3 just so you can use the same socket and save some cost in manufacturing. But other than that, Duos are not a bad chip, but they also are not a premium price system anymore by any shape of the imagination.
This is an 06 model, so, and back then I think it was fairly priced when I purchased it. I think the current Mac Mini is overpriced.
For what it is, yes. Honestly, for what they want to sell the Mac Mini for, I feel like it should be an i5. They should either lower the price or they should make it an i5. Either one would be appropriate. Or do something like make solid state standard or something like that.
Yeah. Now I know other Apple fans will argue, well, it's the form factor.
That's only worth so much.
Well, yeah, form factor is a variable. I just really would have liked it to have been at the price point of the Mac Mini, and so the Mac Mini out there has lasted me for quite a long time. It's never gone down. To me, it's like the little engine that could, and it makes my wife happy. Because one of the biggest things is the wife test. She won't allow some of these cases that I've tried building. I almost had a Linux system out there using Myth TV. And
I love Myth TV. I just wish it was more consumer friendly. Myth TV is not the easiest thing to set up. You need to be a geek to set up Myth TV.
The form factors, and then she saw the Apple Mac Mini bag, and she's like, "Oh, okay, you can have that." And now that thing records all of her, we call it, she's from Guatemala, so the Spanish soap operas, what she calls novellas, we have to if those things fail to record, let me tell you, I get pitched out. So,
okay.
You know, the Mac Mini is like this little steam choo-choo train that never fails.
Okay, one sec, we're up on time for a minute.